Foreign Affairs is seeking further details after reports of the death of a New Zealand Israeli citizen in Gaza.
Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is calling for Hamas fighters to surrender, claiming it's the beginning of the end for Hamas. Adam Hollingworth reports.
If the death is confirmed, this would be the second Kiwi Israeli to die in the conflict. The Jewish community here is small and many do return to Israel. Community leaders say ties remain strong. They've told Newshub that the reports of this death are accurate. They say this Kiwi-born soldier had been living in Israel for several years. Meanwhile, there's still confusion over New Zealand's official position on the conflict. Here's what Foreign Affairs Minister Winston Peters said last Wednesday.
Call on all parties involved in the conflict, as well as countries with influence in the region, to take urgent steps towards establishing a ceasefire.
But the Prime Minister says New Zealand later co-sponsored a resolution to the UN Security Council calling for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, which was then vetoed by the US. However, by this afternoon, the Prime Minister was back to saying more steps must be taken first.
I think our position's really clear that we want to get to an immediate ceasefire as quickly as possible. Everyone wants that. You know, what we are seeing is absolutely appalling. What we're seeing is completely unacceptable. But the reality is, to get to a ceasefire, you've got to be able to take steps to get there.
The UN Secretary-General condemned the 7th of October Hamas attacks, which led 1,200 Israelis dead, but said it did not justify the continued assault on Gaza and urged an immediate ceasefire.
The situation is fast deteriorating into a catastrophe with potentially irreversible implications for Palestinians as a whole and for peace and security in the region.
In recent days, controversial footage has emerged of Palestinian men being detained in northern Gaza. They've been stripped of their underwear. One is forced to hand over an assault rifle, though Palestinians say the man is a civilian, the owner of a small business. But the Israeli Defense Forces say they undress them because they're worried about explosive belts.
Military-aged men located in areas in which the IDF has been engaging Hamas in close-quarter combat, in areas where Hamas fighters, as we have consistently documented throughout this war, have been deliberately disguising themselves as civilians.
Benjamin Netanyahu says dozens of Hamas terrorists have surrendered to the Israeli Defense Force.
They are laying down their weapons and handing themselves over to our heroic fighters. It will take more time. The war is in full swing, but this is the beginning of the end for Hamas.
Meanwhile, hospitals remain in crisis as the death toll rises inside Gaza. This man vowed revenge for his son, who he says was killed by a sniper. Everyday life for Gazans continues to deteriorate. This woman says she has queued for food every day since Wednesday. With the UN Aid Agency for Palestine describing the situation for people living in Gaza as hell on earth, a lone Israeli flag flies over a deserted Palestine square in Gaza City, surrounded by bombed-out buildings. Adam Hollingworth, Newshub.